Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
I asked, "What is the matter?" She said, "Are you telling everyone to call Leslie and invite her on dates? If yes, then stop immediately. She cried all night thinking that you were trying to give her up." Jesus Christ, I thought. That stupid Joe Morgan. I told my mom. Joe Morgan asked me if Leslie and I were still together. I said no. Then he asked if he could ask her out. I replied that she could do whatever she wanted. Mom snapped rather sharply. "Well, now all over the city, they are saying that you put your wife up for auction. What? Do you think she is some kind of commodity? Because of you, now every rogue believes that he has the right to his turn. Francis, she is trying to restore her reputation, and you are just ruining everything." "Mom," I answered. "All I said was that she can decide for herself. I did not tell anyone anything." "I am ashamed of you, Francis," Mom added. "The poor girl is trying to put her life back together. Everyone supports her, and you had no right to do that." I tried to justify myself, but Mom hung up. At work, Leslie did not say anything, and I did not say anything either. So the Halloween party still happened. I missed it. I thought that maybe people would leave me alone now. Yes, of course. Of course. Okay, what always happens on the fourth Thursday in November? Well, you understand. At first, my mother called to forgive me for that story with the dates and the party. Then Richard called. He said he met a new girl that he really liked, and he wanted me to meet her for Thanksgiving. Victoria called too. I expected this. Finally, my father called. His call was not an invitation. It was an order. He told me when to come to their place for Thanksgiving dinner, what to wear, and to make sure I brought flowers for the table. I did not argue and said, "Okay, Dad, I will come." The whole day was terrible. Simply terrible. First of all, Leslie looked amazing. She wore a dark blue polka dot dress with a pleated skirt, 3/4 sleeves, and a slightly scooped neckline. She was wearing a necklace, earrings, and a small bracelet, a set I had once given her. I did not remember on what occasion. In my opinion, there was no reason. When we were still married, I did not need a reason. I only stopped giving her jewelry, flowers, and little things after we lost all our money during the crisis. We then decided that we needed to save money. Her hair was in a ponytail, of course, and looked great. She had started using a tinted balm, and the color became rich again. Damn, she just looked great. I could not help myself. I kept thinking, what if, well, what if? No, that is all in the past. Finally, before dinner, Dad, Richard, and I sat and argued about football. Richard loved the Ravens. Dad hated the Colts and the Cowboys. What about me? I liked the Redskins. Dad called them the grandfather skins, but I was starting to like the Ravens. I also liked the Steelers. Finally, it was dinner. We all sat down at the table. Mrs. Bilson said a prayer. Leslie prepared her famous oysters, and I helped myself to a refill. Nobody said anything when I asked for the oysters. I did not look up, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw Leslie quietly rejoicing. She was naive if she thought she could win me back with oysters after everything she had done. Although they were certainly delicious, dinner was wonderful as always. Every time I looked up from my plate, I saw Leslie looking at me. I looked up, and she quickly lowered her eyes. She behaved the same way at work. Nobody said anything. Everyone pretended that nothing was happening. No one spoke much at dinner, but between the food and dessert, some conversation did begin. Leslie hardly spoke. My dad started talking about how much he hated W. I tried to protect him, but Richard supported his father. Dad said, "Some idiot wants that idiot Patrice back. They say this is the person who is credited with the merit of solving the problem of Iraq, the success of the offensive, and so on. But he was also a womanizer who cheated with this society girl, Broadwell." Looking back, it seems to me that this whole conversation was a setup. I said, "This guy Scott Broadwell is really weak for taking his cheating wife back." Leslie blushed. I wanted her to blush. Dad said he thought her husband was a real man for taking her back, to protect his sons and keep his family together. Richard agreed with his father, but it was his mother who said something that became a real breaking point. Mom looked at me, then at Leslie, and said, "I am sure that poor girl, Broadwell, was completely confused. I mean, to be in another country, surrounded by some important general, and her husband is not nearby. She was almost 40. She probably felt a little insecure." I interrupted her. "No." Mrs. Beelan interrupted me. "I know what you are going to say. There is no excuse. I agree, but I do not agree at the same time. I think the poor girl just found herself in the wrong situation, met a war hero, a man everyone respected, and she felt alone. He probably messed with her head. She lost her head over status. I think I interrupted her again. There is no excuse for betrayal. At this moment, Richard's companion, a pretty girl very similar to Leslie, said, "Can you tell me something?" Her father and everyone else looked at her. Her father said, "Of course, dear." She looked at Richard and said, "I do not think it was right. She had a husband. I know that I would never." Leslie interrupted. She did not say anything. She just pushed back her chair, stood up quietly, and left the table. What about me? I felt vindicated, but also a little sad. Richard's companion precisely stabbed Leslie as if using a real knife. I think she did it to please Richard, but I still felt sorry for Leslie. Not much, but a little. She deserved it, though. A few minutes later, Leslie returned. Mom and Mrs. Beelan brought pies, tapioca, and lemon cake. We all drank coffee and ate dessert. A few minutes later, Mrs. Beelan asked if Leslie had called her parents. Leslie said, no, and added that if she had called, they probably would not be home. Mrs. Beelan persuaded her to call after all. As it turned out, Leslie was right. The maid answered the call and said that her father had gone on a business trip and her mother had flown to Seattle to visit her sister. Leslie reminded us of her Aunt Annie, who disgraced the family by marrying a mechanic. They moved to Seattle to be closer to their eldest daughter. He opened a business restoring and upgrading classic cars. I watched as Leslie went into what I called her mechanical mode. When she talked about her parents, her words sounded rote, lifeless, formal, and mechanical. Richard's companion, who was completely new to our company, said that it was strange that no one from Leslie's family had called her. Nobody answered. I did not stay longer after that. I left. When I got home, I called my parents to thank my mom for dinner. Leslie answered. I hung up. I decided to thank my mom later. On Saturday, I was at the park office. Woodrow was not feeling well, so I took the whole day off. Woodrow had been missing a lot lately. Everyone knew he was sick. He must have asked Leslie to come over because she showed up a little later than me. She needed to file something, and I had a whole bunch of little things that I could do. Leslie and I never spoke in the office, and I was glad about that. She brought me lunch in a styrofoam container with leftovers. She mentioned Thanksgiving and said she thought I had called on Thursday night to thank everyone for dinner. I said, that is why I called. She did not say anything for a while, and then she said that she thought the Broadwell woman had no excuse and could have no excuse for what she had done. I did not answer her. I took lunch home. She, or someone else, put in a lot of leftover turkey, a bowl of her special sauce, 3 slices of pie, some potatoes, some stuffing, and a good portion of her oysters. That evening, I had a second feast. I especially enjoyed the oysters. While I ate, I thought about Leslie and me. We had been apart for quite some time, and she came back almost 4 weeks ago. We worked together and got along. I thought maybe I could handle it. Of course, I probably missed the nights. I missed tenderness, but I had dogs. I made it through Thanksgiving. Then Advent began. During Advent, every week for 5 or 6 weeks, I do not remember exactly, one of the families lit a candle. This was what Leslie, the kids, and I always did. We did this just a year ago. We would not have done this if I had known then what she was doing to Weatherby. Anyway, the pastor called me. He said he knew Leslie and I were still having issues, but asked me to join her for one of the candlelight ceremonies. I told him no. This caused a new storm. 2 hours after I told this person no about Advent, my mom called me. She was furious. Then Mrs. Beelan called. She was not furious, just deeply saddened. She thought I could at least try to show a little kindness. Then Mrs. Bartlett called, and then Mrs. Camber, and then 3 more women. I kept thinking, what part of the word no do they not understand? Finally, Mrs. CW called. She has known me since childhood. I mowed her lawn, and she used to be my babysitter. She was kind. She asked what I could say. So, in the 3rd week of Advent, I stood in church next to Leslie, lighting candles. I looked back at the congregation. In front of me was a crowd of empty faces, the young people who knew nothing and did not care about Leslie and me, and the older ones who knew, and many of them had their own opinions. This made me a little angry. I looked at the older people. They were all smiling as if they were thinking, oh, they are back together. What a lie. The older women looked at me with that same look that women sometimes have. It was a little disgusting to see married women giving me subtle hints while sitting next to their husbands and children. Worst of all, some men stared at Leslie. Up to this point, I had avoided all contact with Leslie. When I looked at her, she was looking at me. As soon as our eyes met, she quickly lowered her eyes. This annoyed me, although I did not know why. Winter finally arrived, and with it, several more of those same shifts occurred. Some of them seriously hurt me. First, what happens after Thanksgiving? That is right, Christmas and New Year. I did not go to church, but I went to my mom and dad's Christmas dinner. It was almost a repeat of Thanksgiving, giving only without Richard's companion, without Mrs. B. Lynn, who was away with one of her daughters, and without talk of marriage. I spent the New Year at home. Mom said Mrs. B. Lynn and Leslie came to see them for New Year's. She said they both went home immediately after they dropped the ball on TV. Shortly after the New Year, problems began. Well, not exactly problems, but almost. What could I say? What should I have done? It was cold. It was winter. I was bored and tired of sitting at home all day long. I began to sometimes go out for dinner just once or twice a week, and I never spent more than I could afford. I certainly never ordered alcohol. I usually went to Madigan. They had great steaks, and I also liked their green beans and potato salad. One evening, on an incredibly cold Thursday in early January, I noticed that a lot of snow had fallen that day. Snow plows cleared the roads, but by evening, due to warming, everything was covered with a crust of ice. I was extremely hungry. When I parked in the lot, the first thing I saw was Mr. Belson's old pickup truck. Leslie rode it. I thought, is she in the restaurant? So, I went in anyway, and there she was at the table with 3 young girls barely older than our daughter. What was she doing in Madigan with these girls? I thought. Then I understood. Leslie was always ready to help. She had rejoined the crisis center team. Our city, thanks to the ever-changing nature of society and the problems caused by the economic crisis several years ago, had been going through difficult times. Families especially suffered because of unemployed fathers and husbands. Many men had no money but still had bills to pay and children to raise. Most of them simply accepted the situation, looked for part-time work, and moved on. But some, those who had no skills at all, those who were too old. Some people were stubborn and refused to change anything. Others were simply weak, and sometimes downright incapable of handling their problems. These people began to drink. It was because of these difficulties that I was sure Leslie had decided to return to her rescue mission. It was somewhat ironic. A woman who could barely help herself was trying to fix the lives of others. I sat down at a table at the very far end of the room and waited for Shirley. Shirley was an elderly woman whose husband had died of throat cancer. She was left alone without insurance, without her husband's pension, and without money. She was at least 70 years old, and the only thing she could do was take orders, wipe tables, and share local gossip. I adored Shirley. Her husband was a good man who worked at a sawmill, but unfortunately, he chewed tobacco. Well, everyone has their own habits. Shirley came to my table with steak and all the trimmings. That is right, Mrs. Blanchard, I replied. Blanchard was her last name. I could never just call her Shirley. I asked, what kind of meeting are they having there? I pointed to the table where my almost ex-wife was sitting. Shirley looked in that direction, then back at me. Leslie is working with the crisis center again. These girls are young wives with problems. Do you see them? Lauren and Barbara, their husbands worked in an egg factory. They were fired, and since then, all they have done is drink and swear. The third is Muriel. She has a real problem. Her husband does not drink, but has become a little rough at home with poor Muriel, although he does not touch the children. Even from where I was sitting, I could see marks on her cheek. I asked, so my wife decided to save the world? Shirley put her hand on my wrist. Listen, honey, we all know what happened between you and Frances, but she was always one of the good ones. You need. I interrupted her. Start with coffee. Shirley took the hint. She took the menu and left. There were not many people in the hall. I was hoping to overhear their conversation. It was a pity that I had chosen such a distant table. I did not hear anything, but I saw everything perfectly. Leslie was in her element. She always looked her best when she was helping others. Then the situation changed. The cheerful, helpful Leslie disappeared, and I saw only melancholy and sadness. Then I realized she noticed me. I ruined her evening, perhaps preventing her from feeling useful. I knew I should not feel this way, but it made me uncomfortable. On the other hand, part of me was pleased. I raised my hand and called Shirley over. When she came, I told her to bring the bill to Leslie's table and told her they could order dessert if they wanted. Shirley smiled and headed toward my almost ex's table. I saw the mood change again. Leslie listened to Shirley, glanced at me, waved her finger slightly, and seemed to perk up a little. Well, I thought I did a good deed. I had to admit, I felt a little smug. Leslie was sitting there content and happy, feeling like she was doing something important and useful. Then she saw me, and her little happy bubble burst. She suddenly turned from happy to sad. But then I offered to pay their bill and dessert, and she came to life a little again. I was in control. I was a man. I was an idiot. I ate but did not stay long. I had an old scanner at home. Well, of course, I was a volunteer firefighter. I needed to know what was going on around me. I was lying in bed a couple of days after the Madigan story when I heard the scanner beep. Someone had called 911. I sat up and listened. The person on duty from the crisis center was on the line. She received a panic call from Muriel Krause, something about her husband and her. I listened more closely and realized from the voice that the person calling from the crisis center was Leslie. I heard her say she was hanging up and heading to the Krause's house. Damn it, I thought. What is she up to? We have emergency services for such situations. We have state patrols. God, what if Muriel's husband was drunk or worse? I immediately ran out of the house, half-dressed and without a coat. I jumped into my Jeep, started the engine, and headed toward the Krause's house at full speed. I had another monitor in the Jeep, but all I heard was noise, confusion, and a bunch of voices. I put the pedal to the metal, blew through the only traffic light between me and the Krause's house, and arrived just in time to see the police coming down the steps. Am I late, Leslie? I got there too early and got hurt. I have to admit, I was scared. I jumped out of the Jeep and ran to the nearest officer. I knew him, but could not remember his name. I asked, what happened? What happened? Where is Muriel? Where is my wife? The officer looked at me irritably. Nothing happened. They are inside. Without saying another word, he turned around and walked toward his car. I rushed to the Krause house, entered, and hurried to the kitchen. What did I see? Muriel, her husband, and my foolish wife were sitting at the table as if nothing had happened, with cups of coffee in their hands. I exclaimed, what is going on here? Leslie looked at me. She was wearing a white coat that made her look like a polar bear. She said, oh, hi, Francis. Muriel's husband fell down the stairs, and she thought he hit his head, but it is okay. Would you like some coffee? I was dumbfounded. You called 911. Leslie calmly replied, yes, but everything is already in order. Will you have coffee with us? I just shook my head and left. Who was dumber? Her, for calling emergency services, or me, for rushing here like a fool? I swore I would never do that again. It was the 15th of January. I remembered the date because it was associated with some holiday. I only knew that it was cold. Leslie was not supposed to come, so it was just me and Woodrow in the office. He did not look good. Woodrow looked up at me. Francis. Yes, sir, Francis. I will be gone soon. I looked at my watch. It was a little after 10 in the morning. I said, if you want, go home. Everything is calm here. He shook his head. No, I mean that my time is coming to an end. I still did not understand. Come on, sir, go rest. Everything will be fine. No, Francis, he said quietly. I have a tumor in my brain. It is inoperable. I have already written a statement. It finally dawned on me, but I did not know what to say. Everything will be fine, sir. I am sure. He interrupted me. Shut up, son. I said I am dying, and I said that I recommended you for my place, although Annapolis may want to invite someone from the outside. Woodrow, I said I do not want your job. I really meant it. I was not trying to sound noble. I really did not need this job, but not like this. I love this man. He was like a second father to me. I did not know what else to say, but I was sure he understood. Do not be an idiot. You are exactly the one I want now. Listen, I just sat there and nodded. When I am gone, which will be in a couple of weeks, you and Leslie will be left. She is in a temporary position right now, but you can keep her until Annapolis decides what to do. I know what you are thinking, but Francis, I wish you would give her a chance. She needs a job. I thought about his words. Damn, I could get rid of her. I would have a legitimate reason. Is this what I wanted? I said to Mr. Patch, I should probably keep her, at least until they decide what to do with you. He did not smile. I do not think he believed me. I would like that, son. Now, if you do not mind, I will go home. I nodded again. He put on his coat and hat and left. I sat there for a long time feeling absolutely empty. All sorts of thoughts were spinning in my head. What am I going to do? Well, at least now I can get rid of Leslie. Damn, I do not need her at all. But do I really want this? Do I want to let Woodrow down? Am I obligated to do this? We seemed to work well together. I knew she needed a job. I did not know it yet, but my chance to get rid of her would appear much sooner than I thought. The larger non-incident with the crosses happened shortly after the new year. Leslie continued to work in the call center, and although my scanner was always on, I did not hear anything until early February. Woodrow handed in his resignation and now only came in occasionally to keep an eye on things. I had not fired Leslie yet. Then, late in the evening, it was Thursday, I heard another emergency call from the center. Leslie called again. Why? I thought. Cannot these women call themselves? This case seemed serious. One of the old men in the city, a real drunkard, was furious with his wife. There was complete hysteria in the air was tense. I heard Leslie's voice. Yes, she was heading to the scene. I turned off the scanner. No, I will not get involved in this anymore. Less than an hour later, my father called me. He was in the hospital. He said Leslie was there too, and when they asked her for insurance, it turned out she did not have any. Did you cancel her health insurance? He asked. I replied, yes, I removed it. You knew? My father exploded. He shouted into the phone. She is still technically your wife. What are you going to do? Damn, I thought. I canceled her policy, so what? It never occurred to me that she was so careless that she did not do anything to replace it. Could she not have gotten Medicaid or something like that? I knew that her part-time job did not provide insurance. Even worse, is she hurt? I asked. My father continued to shout, are you stupid? Yes, she was badly hurt. Then he added, what are you going to do about it? He scared me so much that it seemed to me that he himself was going to have a heart attack. I said, I will come now. When I got there, they let me in right away. It turned out that the old man, drunk as usual, pushed Leslie down the stairs in a rage. When I saw her in the ward, I felt sick. I came closer and felt a growing panic. Leslie sat slightly raised. Damn, I thought. No matter the circumstances, she always looks like some kind of beauty queen. I thought they would put her in a cast, but she only had a bandage. I later learned that this is called a figure-8 bandage. Her leg was elevated and in a cast. She was clearly unhappy, which was not surprising. As soon as she saw me, she burst into tears again. I was in a daze. All my so-called first aid skills seemed to evaporate. It was stupid, but I went up and touched her forehead. I did not know what else to do. My first aid skills were, to put it mildly, not up to par. Her forehead was cold. Honestly, I did not know what to do or what was really wrong with her. My mind was blank. But I knew why. When someone close to you is hurt, the emotionally involved person often loses their composure. So I lost it. If she had been hypothermic or nearly drowned, I probably would have known what to do. But here, I was helpless. I had to admit that she was hurt, and I was scared. Well, it is Leslie. Leslie, make a sound. Oh, Francis, forgive me. I wanted to help. She paused, not knowing what else to say. She really, truly needed a huge amount of care, and I absolutely wanted to give it. But I just stood there like an idiot with my hands at my sides. Does it hurt? I asked. She sobbed. My leg hurts terribly, but my arm only has a nasty tingling sensation. There was a nurse nearby I did not know. She said, the collarbone fracture is clean, and that is good. She will have to be kept motionless for several weeks. The leg needs to be left alone for a few days, and then only used for bathing or toilet. There were people standing around us. They just looked at me and my parents. We stood, me, Mom, Dad, Victoria, and some nurse with a pile of papers. They showed me the bill. I had no idea that fractures could be so expensive. I handed someone my credit card. Mom, Dad, Victoria, and I stepped aside a little to talk. We probably should have left the room. Leslie looked at us, sobbing and crying quietly. Dad, looking past me at Leslie, said, she is too exhausted to go back to Mrs. Bilson. Mom agreed. You are right. Mrs. Bilson is too old to care for her, and I am not in that condition either. I added, she definitely will not be able to drive Mr. Bilson's truck, which has a manual transmission. In general, she will not be able to drive anything with her shoulder. Victoria, with her too loud and shrill voice, added, the main question is, what should we do with her? Leslie, of course, heard this and sobbed. Nobody needs me. I am just useless. I will have to go back to Baltimore. I looked at my parents. They looked at me. I looked at Victoria. She looked at me. I looked at Leslie. She was crying. I looked at my father again. My father looked at me and simply shook his head. I looked at Leslie again. She cried quietly and whispered, "I will just leave." I lost my patience. I shouted at her, "Shut up. Just shut up. You are not going anywhere." She stopped crying and just looked at me. Crap. So what could I do? I could not send her back to the place she came from. She had no money and no other place at all. This cannot happen to me. Am I finished? I thought. I looked at my father and whispered, "This is just some kind of nightmare." He put his hands on my shoulders and smiled. 7 days have passed since Leslie's accident. The accident? That idiot should not have interfered in the first place. I warned her. Okay, my dad warned her not to get involved. Every time someone got into a fight at home, she was supposed to leave. She was supposed to leave the hospital in 2 days, not 7. A complete waste of time and money, my money. She could not stand on her feet and complained of dizziness. So I hired an ambulance to take her to Cumberland for a full examination, MRI, tests, and x-rays. I have never heard of such confusion. We were told she had a traumatic brain injury, a concussion, and that she would need neuropsychological testing. Those who have been through this know what it is like. Ding ding, the cash register of the account is working. When they charged us a lot of money and did all the tests, they said they found nothing. I knew when they scanned her skull they would not find anything. Oh, Mom, Dad, Victoria, Richard, Mrs. Bilson, the pastor, everyone was delighted. I was surprised by only one thing. The doctor said the scars from her 3 old rib fractures looked good. I asked, what other scars on the ribs? Then Leslie confessed. She admitted that in the very accident for which Victoria suffered so much, she herself broke 3 ribs. I think they told me about this, but I swore that Leslie claimed the ribs were only bruised. I should have understood. There were other cases when the children were small and Leslie was seriously ill. I remember one time she was clearly hot. She probably had a high fever, but she never showed me a thermometer. One day she became so ill that I had to take a day off work to bathe her in cold water and apply cool compresses to her forehead. She had always been so stubborn, thinking that it was okay for her to get sick as long as she cared about others. So, 7 days passed, and I stood in what I considered my home. Leslie slept in my bedroom, in my bed. Madness is the only way to describe it. Okay, I agreed that Mrs. Bilson's house and my mom and dad's houses were not suitable, so my home remained hers. The day after Leslie was discharged, everyone immediately gathered at my place. It was just funny. Everything had to be changed. Their voices are still ringing in my ears. "Oh, this will not do. This will not do. We cannot leave this. No, this is out of the question." I swear, nothing satisfied them. Leslie needed the largest bedroom. If she gets the biggest room, then there will be room for Victoria too. Of course, we need Victoria. She returned from school before me and took care of her mother, giving the older people a break. But if Victoria had to move, and she did, then my bed had to go. 2 single beds instead of 1 double. Richard said he was tired of renting, so the smaller bedroom was given to him. What about me? I got a sofa. When I bought the house, I removed the old carpets and planned to sand the floors. Forget it. Dad and I brought Leslie's and used rugs, and they decorated the large bedroom and the living room. And that was not all. Oh yes, poor Leslie could not move, so she had to get satellite TV. Dad suddenly got involved. The winter was as cold as the Ice Age, and he said my propane was not heating the house enough. He had a friend who had another friend who was trying to get rid of an old Fisher furnace. My old house had a fireplace and a chimney, so Dad and Richard installed a stove and a chimney liner. And guess what kind of stove it was? A Fisher Grandma Bear, the second largest model. The house had turned into an oven. I did not have any firewood, but my dad had plenty at his place. I thought that 2 cords would be enough, but Dad and Richard decided they needed 4. And guess who loaded, unloaded, and stacked all that firewood? Me. My furniture seemed to fit, but the curtains, napkins, stainless steel cutlery, and the bathroom, the only bathroom, were unsatisfactory. Then they added a large new sofa recliner and new lamps. Poor Leslie had to rediscover reading. So there I stood, in my house, which was supposed to be my refuge, and my almost ex-wife, who had cheated on me, was sleeping in my bed, in my bedroom. My mom, Dad, Mrs. Bilson, and my children were hanging around in my living room, sitting on the sofa where I was supposed to sleep. Okay, I decided it would last 6 weeks. No, they said at least 10. What happened to my house? Where has my life gone? And who on earth cut off my dignity? Whoever said it could not get worse was wrong. Old Wooder retired. He was dying and recommended me for his leadership position. Well, yes, of course, we lived in good old Maryland, the free state. Free for someone, but not for me. The only state in the country with a higher percentage of minorities than Maryland is Hawaii. In Hawaii, there are Hawaiians and Asians. Maryland has a 30% African American population, and the state has been as liberal as Massachusetts since Kennedy, probably because it was Catholic. Heck, the rest of the state might be mostly black, but there were almost no African Americans west of the Hagerstown Valley. So with local credentials and experience, I was looking at Wooder for the position. But that was not the case. I applied, and a few weeks later I received a certified letter indicating the time and location of my interview. A Saturday morning, of course, in downtown Baltimore. Who conducts interviews on Saturdays? Those who invite 50 people for 6 different positions. My time was set for 9 a.m. I arrived on time and waited, and waited, and waited. People came and went. They had my name. They knew who I was and why I was there. Others came after me, were interviewed, and left. By 11:45, I walked up to one of the women, an African-American woman who seemed to be running the show, and asked her a simple question. My interview was scheduled for 9 o'clock. It is almost 12 o'clock. Will you have time to see me? She gave me a sarcastic smile and said, "We will call you." Then she added, "You want us to treat everyone fairly, do you not?" That was the last straw. I had not seen more than 10 white faces all morning, and as far as I could tell, there was not a white man among them. I was marked. They treated me like I was marked. A few minutes later, they called me in. The interviewees included 3 black men, 2 black women, and 1 white woman. What on earth? I knew it was a farce. I went through the formalities. 3 weeks later, I received a notification. They thanked me for participating, said I had done well, but chose another candidate. Was I surprised? Hardly. About 3 weeks later, Thurman Freeman arrived. Very nice guy, born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, 26 years old, African-American, an environmental science major, and as dumb as a post. He had all the documents. He knew the theory, but he did not know what poison ivy looked like. I tried to warn him. No, Thurman, this is not a red maple. Luckily, he said he wanted to set up home at Deep Creek Lake, so I probably would not see him much. This suited me fine. So I missed out on the promotion. My almost ex-wife somehow forced her way into my house, and my parents and children actively undermined my every move. What should I complain about? I told them, and I was not kidding, the show is about to end. They did not believe me. The only thing that made this whole thing even remotely bearable was that Leslie turned out to be a much better tenant than I thought. She did not whine, did not complain, and did not cry. Well, she almost did not cry, and almost did not try to get me back. And of course, she was just a sight for sore eyes. After a few days, my mom, dad, and Mrs. Bilson stopped coming over as often. Mom and Mrs. Bilson, they continued to provide us with good food, and Mom did the laundry. Victoria took care of Leslie when she returned from school. I did not have to make the beds or fix anything. Although, to be fair, I slept on the couch myself, so I really did not have anything to worry about regarding the beds. Time passed slowly. At night, it was the middle of winter. Victoria was barely home when she was not doing homework, and Richard slept with us, but that was about it. I think it was inevitable that sooner or later Leslie would want to talk. Our first real conversation about what she had done was about 3 weeks into her recovery. Realizing that I was struggling at work, I was mindlessly looking at job descriptions in other states when Leslie quietly entered the living room. She hesitantly approached and whispered, "Francis." Without much warmth, I replied, "What?" She said, "I am sorry. I have to be here. I try not to cause any inconvenience." I replied, "You are not causing any trouble." I lied. She came closer. "Can I sit down?" I moved a little on the sofa. She sat down. "Francis, yes, can we talk about us?" "That is about me? What do you want to talk about?" "Well, I never said anything about what I did or why." I interrupted. "Yes, I have thought about it. I wanted to be rude." "What was that like?" She flinched and muttered, "Maybe if I could explain." I leaned back and said, "Of course, go ahead." Only a year had passed. I guess I wanted to know. I thought, why not find out what she did and why she decided to destroy a happy marriage and family? Well, yes, why not wait a whole year to explain everything? She began, "Well, You know, my mother supplied me. I immediately interrupted her. You are not going to use the old it's all because of the pills excuse, are you? She paused and said, Oh no, not at all. Not because of that. But I took sedatives. I felt bad. I was depressed, you understand. Damn, I thought, this is going to be bad. I told her, No, I did not know that. Leslie said, and do not bore me with the old story about medications and depression. She cringed. No, I mean I was scared. Understand. I interrupted her again. Scared? Scared of what? Why do we not have enough intimacy with you? I think there was bitterness in my voice, but I did not care. She said, Oh please, let me tell you. I leaned back. I decided, okay, finally, let her speak. Let him dig his own hole as he pleases. She added, Can I? I replied, Yes, sure. You have all my attention. Okay. Well, you know I am in premenopausal hormonal age-related changes. I wanted to laugh, but I remained silent. She continued, I started getting hot flashes. I did not sleep well. I felt fat and swollen all the time. And you were working all the time. You were always busy. And I interrupted her again. I could not stand it. It is clear now you will say it is my fault. My fault because you were lonely and needy for attention, and I was an angry, uncaring person who ignored your emotional needs. She raised her hand. No, that is not the point. I was so fat. I was getting more gray hair, more wrinkles, a double chin. And you were in college with those young girls. You were so beautiful, so elegant. And I felt so old. I had to stop her. So, you decided to sleep with Richard Weatherby? She replied, No, not really. It is just he came back, and you wanted to sleep with him? No. He appeared. I stopped her. Tell me, Leslie, when did he appear? Why did he come here? Did you call him yourself? She answered immediately, No, I did not call. She fell silent for a second. I watched her gather her thoughts, and she continued. It was a week before last year's Thanksgiving, a little after 2 p.m. I was finishing my shift in the library. I was arranging the discs when I looked up and saw him. I was surprised. I said, Richard, what brings you here? He said, I came to see you. She continued, Honestly, Francis, I did not call him. I asked him, Why are you here? God, it has been 20 years. He replied, I remember. I remember you. I missed you. I needed to see you. I shook my head. It was incredible. But she continued. I asked him, Why? In the name of God. And he said, Is there somewhere we can talk? At this point, I looked at Leslie and said, This is already too much. Do you really expect me to sit here and listen to this nonsense? At that moment, I realized that I did not want to listen to any more of her lies. She somehow lowered her head and whispered, No, probably not. I stood up. I will go to the city. When I return, do not wait for me. She nodded and also stood up. When I went out to my Jeep, I thought at least she did not try to blame it all on antidepressants. If she had done that, I would probably have kicked her out. Female hormonal changes in the body. Of course, that still needed to be considered. I checked my watch. It was not too late. We did not even have time to have dinner. I went into town and bought a couple of Time Life magazines to read the next day at the office. I was almost made up my mind. Since I was not promoted, I would have to look for something else. Meanwhile, my stomach began to growl. I thought, why not go to Denny's? I am not going to destroy myself because of her. My job, my family, my life, I will not do that again. I drove to Denny's, grabbed a booth, and ordered an omelet. The place was almost empty, but I noticed a few familiar faces. To the right sat 3 people I knew. One of them noticed me and walked toward me. Damn, I thought. Weldon McCorkle is one of the few people I truly hate. There was a reason I did not like him. As he came closer, I remembered. McCorkle sat down opposite me, grinned, and said, You are leaving Leslie. Everyone knows why. He leaned over and looked toward his friends. I thought, now it will begin. McCorkle, still with a grin, added, You will have difficulties with her in court. This is Maryland, you know. She will clean you out. McCorkle had no idea how poor I really was. I nodded. I knew where he was going. He continued, Do you remember Ona Rucker? I nodded as I remembered. If you want, we will help you. I kept an impassive expression on my face. I will let you know. He stood up, smiled, and slightly slurring his tongue, added, We are with you, buddy. Then he left. Buddy? What a? I remembered Winona. Winona Ryder was a young girl just out of high school and university. She was not very pretty, so she had almost no relationship experience. She fell in love with McCorkle's friend, whose name I no longer remembered. This man made her pregnant. When she told him, he just laughed in her face. She tried to force him to marry her, but he stopped her by gathering several of his friends to spread the rumor that they had all slept with her. Poor Winona was crushed. She left the city. I assumed that McCorkle thought he could get his friends to threaten Leslie by saying they had all slept with her, which would force her to give up her claim to the division of the property. Idiots. They did not know the laws of Maryland. They did not know Leslie. They did not know me. I lost my appetite. I left $20 on the table, got up, and drove back home. When I returned, Leslie was waiting for me. She did not say anything, but I noticed that she had warmed up the homemade vegetable soup that my mother had made. We ate in silence. I was glad I had given up the omelet. It was funny. I hated to admit it, but I was somehow glad that Leslie was there. That was the last time Leslie tried to explain herself for some time. I was not sure if I was even interested. Soon, Woodrow called me. Woodrow Patch was dying around mid-Sunday. His wife called me and said she and Woodrow would like to see me. He went to the hospital several times. Everyone knew his end was near. She asked me to come the same day, and I agreed. The Patch family lived on a farm outside of town. They only had one daughter, Charlene, and she had only one girl. I drove up their driveway, parked the Jeep, walked up onto the porch, and knocked on the door. They had a large house with 2 large verandas, but their main entrance was always the kitchen door on the side. I knocked, and Mrs. Patch opened the door and let me in. She said, "Woodrow is resting in the living room." I nodded and entered. He sat in a chair with his eyes closed. I thought he looked old and haggard. I walked over, sat down next to his chair, and lightly patted him on the shoulder. He opened his eyes and whispered, "Francis." I said, "Woodrow, how are you?" "Not very much," he replied. I was afraid. I thought, "It is almost over." I said, "I am glad you came." I asked, "How can I help?" His eyes looked yellow. He looked like he was very tired. His hands were shaking. I wondered what illness he was really suffering from. He threw his head back and said, "You can forgive her. Bring her home. She is a good person." He must have read my thoughts because he became silent and leaned back slightly. Then he added, "No, I do not think you can." I had to say something. I might never see him again, at least not in this world. "Listen, I have thought about it," I said. He smiled and reached for my hand, finding my wrist. He squeezed it. God, how weak he was. He said, "I know you will do the right thing." Then he leaned back slightly and looked out the window. He let go of my wrist. Behind me, I heard Mrs. Patch clear her throat. I turned around. She nodded towards the dining room, and I stood up to follow her. We sat down at the table, and she started talking. She folded her hands in her lap. "He does not have long left, Francis. Everything in his body is failing." She dabbed her eyes with her apron. "Woodrow and I only had one daughter. He always thought of you as the son we could have had if we had more children." She did not explain why they did not have more children, and I did not ask. These were people like my parents. They kept personal matters to themselves. She added, "You know, we love Leslie very much. We had only one daughter, and our girl gave birth to only one granddaughter. If something happened to her..." I remembered Leslie's role in saving their granddaughter. She continued, "I will tell you, Francis, everything with Woodrow and me was not always smooth sailing. We almost broke up." She must have noticed the expression on my face because she explained, "No, nothing like what happened with you and Leslie. Just tiredness, I guess. We had plans and hopes, you see. Big house, big family. And then there was that incident on the highway when you were with Leslie. Well, you know, it scared us and made us think about what we have. Most people would have just driven by, but Leslie, well, you know how she is." Mrs. Patch looked like she was about to cry. I assumed that a man who was about to lose the love of his life had the right to do so. I wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease her pain, but I could not think of anything. She looked at me. "We love her very much, you know. If only you could." She must have realized what I was thinking because she fell silent. She stood up and walked toward the kitchen door. I followed her. This happened on Sunday. On Tuesday, Woodrow was sent back to the hospital. He never returned home. The funeral was on Saturday. Late that evening, after Mr. Patch's funeral, Leslie tried to talk again. I sat at the Denny's table and looked through various brochures. It never occurred to me how qualified I was. Opportunities for people like me were all over the country, not just in the West, but very close to where we lived. I received word that my new boss, Mr. Freeman, wanted to spend more time on the western rivers. I could not blame him because spring was almost here, which meant more fishermen as well as the usual stream of rafters, canoes, and kayakers. Most people who come here respect nature, of course. We sometimes have problems, injuries from time to time, and drowning every few years. So it was perhaps logical that he would leave the conveniences of Cumberland and Hagerstown to check things out for himself. The Potomac River is our longest and, in many ways, our most dangerous river. It is not just because of the Category 5 rapids at Great Falls, but also the low dams called spillways that are located upstream. Several of them are in the Harper's Ferry area. These dams are deadly because inexperienced people, thinking they can canoe across them, capsize and end up in a closed flow of water. This is called the water wheel of death. A person is pulled underwater again and again until they weaken and drown. Others often go out on the water in early spring, capsize, and do not have time to reach the shore, which quickly leads to hypothermia. This is especially true for those who consider themselves experienced. For example, a 50-year-old accountant with 4 bypass surgeries who thinks he is Daniel Boone and can. A man tried to canoe the entire 400-mile river, but capsized in the icy water and struggled to get to shore. I sat at the table looking through the brochures and waited for our expert from the University of Pennsylvania to arrive. Leslie came up to me again. This time she seemed more confident. She sat down in a chair. On the contrary, Francis, I need to tell you everything. To the very end, she said. I sat back and thought, it looks like this was bound to happen sooner or later. Let it be now, I said coldly. She straightened up and said, I want to tell everything directly, without concealment. As I looked at her, I thought about how we were married for 22 years, and I loved her completely and unconditionally all that time. She was gone for 6 months, and I never stopped thinking about her or believing that I loved her. And now, oh, she was still just as beautiful. We worked together in the office for several weeks and recently lived together in my house. We got along well. Everything was comfortable. But it dawned on me, do I need this explanation? Do I love her at all? I was not sure anymore. What do I want? Do I want her? What do I expect from her? And what will this change? I decided to just go with the flow. Okay, speak up, Leslie. Okay, she said. I will start from the very beginning. This was last fall. You worked all day in the parks and then went to college twice a week. The other 2 nights when you were not at college, I worked in the library. I nodded. So far, everything sounded plausible and without lies. She continued, I felt a lot of things. I still felt guilty about Victoria's accident, about the money we had lost in the crisis, and about the fact that I did not feel like I was contributing enough to the family budget. That seemed reasonable, so I kept listening. She moved on. I was depressed. It was autumn, and you know how I can feel at this time of year. I interrupted her. Yes, I probably know. She nodded. Fine. Well, I was depressed and feeling sorry for myself. I saw those girls you taught. They are so young. I watched them next to you. They flashed in their mini skirts, clung to you in transparent blouses, waved their elastic ponytails in front of your face. You liked it. I saw how much you enjoyed it. And here I am. I dye my hair, smear myself with face creams, wear special supportive bras, and look at my cellulite skin every morning, Francis. I could not compete with them. I interrupted. You should not have. Damn it, Leslie, she objected. I did not see it that way. I saw the old me in them, but in you I still saw the same you. I think I started to get jealous. Maybe a little angry. Angry at you for still being so popular, still looking so young, still handsome. And then Richard appeared. He just appeared out of nowhere, and he looked good. I waited for all the accusations to fall on us, but I held back. She continued, I am not making this up. I was wrong, and I know it. He started courting me. He suggested we go for lunch, and I agreed. He looked at me the way you looked before. He kept saying how beautiful I looked. He said things like, how stupid of you to let me go. And if I were yours, I would tie a rope around your neck and keep you under lock and key. He looked at me, admired me, paid attention to me. And in the evening, I saw you. You asked a couple of questions about the kids, about the laundry, about your parents, and then just went to bed. I could not stand it. This is nonsense, she interrupted me. No, it is not like that, and there is something else. Richard's wife kicked him out. That was when he started crying. Or, well, became emotional. He told me that he had a problem. He caught an infection and had to take medication. He said he had a medical procedure. The pills and the procedure caused him to lose his ability to perform intimately. His wife wanted more, so she kicked him out. I was so desperate that I began to look for consolation and found myself. Leslie continued. She stifled a yawn. It was interesting. She went on. I thought he needed me. Do you remember that old movie from the 1950s where Tony Curtis pretended he could not do anything, and Marilyn Monroe? Oh my God, I interrupted. I thought you were talking about her old movies again. She cut me off. Do you really expect me to believe all that? No, I expect you to listen, she replied firmly. I thought he really was incapable of doing anything, and that is why. I interrupted her again. So you decided to save him. You decided to use your body and your intimate skills to restore him to his former strength. God, Leslie, I am not an idiot, I said. She stopped me and continued her story quietly. It was not like that at all. We went to pick up Denny's. It was dark, and he got into my car. He was so happy. He said I was like Annie Sullivan. I could not help myself. He was really good, was not he? Leslie's eyes lowered slightly, and she began biting the nail on her left index finger. It used to be a distraction for me, but I had grown out of her little tricks. She went on. At that time, Jesus, Leslie. Well, you see, now you know he manipulated you. Leslie looked at me with her trademark beaten dog expression. No, not yet. That only became clear later. I was already bored. Listen, Leslie, I said. I did not want to listen to her nonsense anymore. Do me a favor. Just take a few minutes and tell me everything in order. In order? Yeah, just give me the chronology. When, where, for how long, and what exactly. I watched her. Her face took on a strange expression I had never seen before. She almost mumbled, maybe we can talk later. I could take the paper and write everything down. I chuckled. I did not know why. I just did it. She looked at me, and I could tell she did not like it. The clock showed 17:50. I knew Victoria probably would not come home for several more hours. An old black and white movie with one of Leslie's favorites, Gary Cooper, something called The Westerner, was supposed to start on TV. I smiled at her. Let us skip the timeline for now. I will order pizza, and the old Western movie will start in a few minutes. Do you want to watch it with me? Her face lit up with relief. She smiled happily. I will bring the pillows. You lounge on the sofa, and I will sit on the floor. She got up and ran to the bedroom for pillows. I ordered a cheese pizza and then sat down on the couch. I heard her rummaging around in the back room. I wondered if I still loved her. I stopped feeling angry. It seemed to me that I understood and recognized all her little seductive tricks. I felt comfortable around her. She was still beautiful, but I no longer felt the excitement I had before. It was like looking at Victoria. Victoria was simply stunning. She had the looks that made boys go crazy. I was going crazy too, but not with intimacy. When I thought about my daughter, I remembered the silly old movie Leslie made me watch one day, 16 Candles. There was a scene where the heroine's grandmother gropes her. When I saw my daughter, I thought about that movie and that scene. I think Leslie was starting to look the same to me. Someone who was nice to look at, but not in an intimate way. She was no longer the same as before. Leslie returned with a bunch of pillows and a couple of blankets. The pizza arrived. She first lay down, then sat up, and finally curled up between my legs and put her head on my groin, putting her hands on my hips. I felt excited. Leslie noticed this too, but did nothing. I did not do anything either. I enjoyed the movie, and I enjoyed her company. I tried not to think about anything except the movie and how relaxed I felt. Life went on as usual. Everything continued to happen around me. One day gave way to another, then a week, and weeks passed. Leslie sometimes said that she was. Leslie was working on her chronology, and I did not put any pressure on her. Winter was coming to a stormy end. Mrs. Bilson slipped and fell a little. She did not break anything, but it scared her a lot, and her children as well. She put her Alpenquin home on the market and almost immediately received several offers. She started packing her things. Her eldest daughter had a large house near Romney. One evening, Richard came over and insisted that Leslie and I talk. Leslie could walk well now, at least when I was not looking. Richard hurried us into the kitchen. Mom, Dad, I have made a decision, he said. It was his second year in college. I half expected him to announce his choice of major. How wrong I was. Richard sat down across from Leslie and me and said, I have decided to go into active service. Active service? I asked. Yes, Dad, he added. I am volunteering. I have 2 years of college, and the National Guard has a program. I will be an officer in 6 months. Leslie intervened quickly. No, I will not allow it. They could send you. He answered sharply. Our unit can be sent at any moment. What difference does it make? I asked. Is there something else? Are you sure? He replied. Yes, Dad. Whether you and Mom get back together or not, I am sure I will be fine. And I need to do this. Leslie asked, Does your sister know? No, he replied. Yes, I told her last week, Richard said. Leslie and I just looked at each other. I said, Well, I guess if that is what you want. And that was the end of it. 2 days later, Victoria stunned us. She held her future in her hands. Her SAT scores were excellent. She had a scholarship and was accepted into several universities. All she had to do was send a response. She came in like Richard, sat us down, and announced that she wanted to attend Auburn. Auburn? I asked. Yes, Auburn, she replied. Leslie said, That is in another state. I know that you and Dad do not have money for this, Victoria answered. But grandparents promised to help as soon as they sell the house. I was stunned. I think she noticed it. Yes, Victoria added. Did your grandparents tell you? They are selling the house and are going to buy something in Florida. Orlando, I think. They want to spend the summer here and the winter in the South. I looked at Leslie. She looked at me. This was a surprise for both of us. Then Victoria added the final touch. They want Leslie to move in this spring and then stay to take care of the house starting next winter. My first thought was, finally, my parents gave up the idea of reconciling us. But then it dawned on me. Leslie will be here with them all summer, and in the winter, she will be alone just a few miles from me. The picture was clear. Next winter, Leslie would look after their house, and I would look after Leslie. I looked at Leslie to see how much she knew, but she looked just as surprised as I was. As soon as Victoria left, Leslie and I immediately called my parents. My mom and dad confirmed what our daughter said. Then Leslie dropped another little bombshell. Francis, she began, I have recovered enough to move out this week. I will start packing and moving in with Mom and Dad. I froze for a second. Damn it. I really wanted her to move out finally. From the very beginning, I did not want her to live with me. But suddenly I felt that something was wrong. I could not say exactly what it was, but I intuitively knew that something would go wrong. It was just a feeling, like a sixth sense. A couple of weeks later, the real bomb happened. But before that, Leslie finally plucked up the courage to confess everything once and for all. It was an anticlimax. I assumed that, having realized the futility of further attempts to reconcile, she decided to end this once and for all. It was a Sunday afternoon, right after church, a few days before spring. Both children were out, and a small fire was burning in the fireplace, creating a pleasant warmth. Leslie walked into the living room. Francis, I think we can talk now. I felt pretty good at that moment. I thought, well, this is a great time to have this conversation. In addition, I had been in contact with people from the National Park Service. They had reviewed my application and resume and wanted to meet with me. This was important. So I looked at Leslie and said, Sure, I guess you can. Do you want a Coke or something? She said she would like a Coke, so I went and got us both a can. Then I sat down on the sofa in the living room. Leslie came in and sat on the floor in front of me. I thought, wow, you are on the floor. You are not going to try to manipulate me, are you? She straightened her blouse and pulled her legs up under her skirt. She looked very feminine. She winked at me and said, You know me, Francis. This may be my last chance, and then smiled again. Remember Shay being in the movie Troy? We play with the instruments the gods gave us. I like that movie. We even bought it on DVD. It was still lying somewhere. I looked at her intently, still doubting. Are you sure you did not take anything? She smiled. No, no pills, no wine, nothing, just me. A truly desperate woman. The phrase, desperate woman, meant something. I tried to remember what movie it was from, but I could not. Then I remembered. It must have been from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Elizabeth Taylor played Maggie the cat, and Burl Ives was Big Daddy. I said, Okay, Leslie, no lies. I just want the truth. I really wanted the truth. But despite this, I had already practically decided that there would be no reconciliation, nor a return to marriage. But I liked Leslie. She was still the mother of my children. She worked hard to re-establish herself in the church and in the community. I was on her side. I just did not think I wanted to be married to her. I felt proud of myself. proud of my willingness to forgive and forget, but not to stay in the marriage. I have to admit, she really tried. She moved a little closer, her chest shaking slightly. Okay, that is how it was, she said. I leaned back, listening intently. Richard came to see me. You know that, she said. His wife kicked him out because of a medical problem. I told you about it. Well, we started dating after I finished work at the library. It was November. The days were short. You were always busy. We met at Denny's sometimes. He sat in my car sometimes, and sometimes I sat in his. She sighed. I cannot explain how I felt. I felt sorry for myself, and maybe I was a little angry at you. Maybe even jealous. You were always so busy, so caught up in the important things that needed to be done. And I only had a little space in the library and a few things that needed washing and ironing. That is another thing, she added. Oh, Francis, you are such a good person, but I am so tired of these green pants, green shirts, even green t-shirts and boxers. Sometimes I teased myself that I was living in a Bird's Eye commercial. Remember, ho ho ho. I even hummed that sometimes while washing your clothes. I fidgeted in place. What she said made me feel uncomfortable. First of all, I knew that not all my underwear was green. But about the uniform, what could I do? She was unfair. It looked like she read my mind. Francis, I know I was unfair about the green one, but I just was not thinking straight. She paused, took a deep breath, and continued. Well, Richard was so different. He needed me. He acted like he needed me. He paid attention to me. I told him I felt old and homely. I had gained weight, and some of my clothes became too tight. I know you saw it. My skirts and dresses were tight, forming horizontal folds, and my blouses did not fit my arms. I bought new clothes, prettier ones. I bought them so that you would notice me, but you did not notice. He complimented me. He said I looked the same as in college. She swallowed. Oh, Francis, Richard was remembering our senior year, the kids from Latin America, my sadness, everything. What he said reminded me of his warmth during those years. We sat in the back seat of his car, and he hugged me. It was just like in college. I let him, sorry, but I let him. And I liked it. I looked at her and thought about what was happening. She had her notes in front of her eyes. She did not read them, but she clearly consulted them. I assumed they were like a support for her. It was normal. She told me how she had spent a night with her ex-boyfriend, and I was not even angry. It did not bother me at all. And I knew why. There was another woman in front of me. She was no longer the one I married. It was someone else, someone I neither liked nor disliked. Damn, she was beautiful. Very beautiful. I could have an intimate moment with her, but it would be just one night, just intimacy. I felt good in a way, a little sad, but good. I had outgrown it and moved on. I found myself beyond my old feelings. It was not that I did not want her. It was that I knew I did not need her anymore. Leslie continued. We were sitting in his car, in the back seat, and he was comforting me. He was holding my hands. He was telling me to look at the ornament that was hanging on his rearview mirror. It was something Celtic. It shone and shimmered. He held my hands and told me to look at this decoration and just relax. He told me to just relax and let all the tension flow out of my body through my hands. She closed her eyes and told me to just relax and fall asleep. Sometimes she fell asleep right there. It was like hypnosis, but not really, because she knew that no one can be hypnotized without their knowledge. Sometimes she dozed off for 10 or 15 minutes, then woke up feeling refreshed and rested. Francis, you have no idea how therapeutic it was talking to Richard, she said. I was not sure if this was the real Leslie or some new form of manipulation. I let her continue. How did you end up in West Virginia? I asked. She said, oh, I do not know exactly. He said he had a place to stay, a motel room nearby. He said we should meet there. He said I needed a place where I could be alone and just relax. He said he would help me. He said we could help each other. I thought it was a good idea. She turned away, then looked back at me. Francis, it was like I was a child again. Richard took everything into his own hands. He did not force me to go to West Virginia. I wanted it myself. And it was not about the night. It was something else. 3 times, I said. I thought it happened at least 3 times. My old friend Craig and I figured it out. Leslie replied, no, 4. 3 times, and then you. Now that I know, let me explain. I remember coming to the motel at least 4 times. It was a Motel 6. I do not even remember how I got there. I only remember that he was always already there. He led me to the room each time. The number was different, and I remember how it surprised me because he said that the number was the same. We would go in, and he would make me wait at the door while he walked around the room. Then he came back to me. He led me to the bed. Sometimes I felt like I was sleepwalking, like I was in a dream or in heaven. We have been doing this. I looked at her. She stopped, cried a little, and wiped a tear with the back of her hand. She seemed to have pulled herself together, then continued. Francis, I am sorry. I promised to tell the truth. We met there 3 times. We had an intimate moment 3 times. He was always without protection, without anything. He was so gentle, so kind, so sweet. I felt special. I was starting to get bored and was just about to get up and leave when suddenly the tide of events changed. Francis, she said, something happened for the 4th time. I can and cannot explain it. He met me and took me to my room as always. I listened to her, but if it was the time when I was there, I did not remember it exactly like that. But I let her continue. He took me into the room, and I waited at the door as always. But then he started laughing quietly, barely audible. He walked over to the bed and took off the pillowcase. Then, backing away, he returned and covered the alarm clock radio. Then he looked at me and put his finger to his lips so that I would not say anything. He looked around carefully, and then we heard a car horn blare outside. He grabbed me and took me to the bathroom. He turned on the water and whispered that someone was eavesdropping on the number. He said it was most likely his wife. He told me to wait in the bathroom until he returned. I already knew what day she was talking about. This was the day I used GPS. Leslie continued, I do not know. It felt like I had woken up, but I still stayed in the bathroom. He returned a couple of minutes later and started talking nonsense about his wife, who does not trust him and wants to find a reason for a divorce. He said we would have to hide for a while. Then he added that I needed to take something, a hammer or something, and break the GPS in my car. He told me to return the rental car and have it checked for devices. I asked what he meant. He said, eavesdropping or tracking devices. Then he added, perhaps you are also pursuing us. I interrupted, it was me. I was the one who turned on the alarm on his car. Leslie nodded, and then it was like a light bulb went on for me. Richard never had any physiological problems. He never came to me asking for help. I later found out that he called and spoke to my mother, and she was the one who told him where I lived. The only reason he came to Oakland was to spend a night with me. No, not just that, but to mock me. To this day, I do not know why, but it was my mother who told him everything. I later found out that Richard's wife had kicked him out, but not because of cheating. It was for something else. I wanted to laugh. It was all nonsense, but I kept a serious expression on my face. So, Richard deceived you. Then you realized it. What happened next? I asked. She looked at me and put her papers away. Francis, I had to protect myself. Richard laughed at me. He said that I was on my own. He told me to deny everything. If I said anything, even if I had photos, he said to just deny it. He said he knew me well and that I would believe anything he said. She smiled faintly. You almost believed it. I was just too impatient and thought that if I went back to Baltimore, you would be scared and want me to come back. And so it happened. I stopped her. Yes, I went to Baltimore and found you with Richard. She sat up straight and then relaxed again. She looked at me coldly in the eyes. That is the only thing that did not happen. Yes, I had a cheap, dirty affair. Yes, I even liked it. Not the intimacy itself, and not the fact that I was hiding something, but simply the fact that I left home and did something that no one knew about. What went wrong was that Richard came to Baltimore to see my father, not me. Somehow, Richard's problems were related to my father. I think my father has it all sorted out anyway. Richard and I thought everything was fine. His financial problems were resolved, and I was confident that our marriage would be saved. What you saw, the photographs you had, are not about intimacy. I got a little angry. I saw you go with him to a hotel somewhere on the Beltway. Perhaps, she replied. But it had nothing to do with any novels. It was just a kind of celebration. We did not do anything, honestly. We did not do anything in Baltimore. Meanwhile, I convinced Richard and Victoria to set you up. It was a dirty trick, and they did not want to do it. I knew I did not have anything significant. I mean, photographs of you with that Venica, but I decided to use them. I knew you had feelings for her. I wanted her to be as far away from you, from us, as possible. I stopped her on this stupidity. Damn, Leslie, I told you 100 times that Venica was just a girl I knew. I never took her seriously. She married a good man. After his death, she was in despair. She is still desperate, but she and I, a couple? This has never happened and will never happen. Leslie simply nodded. I know now I had to make a point. So you let yourself be dragged into a stupid affair because you were depressed and feeling sorry for yourself. It was stupid, Leslie. Very stupid, just terribly stupid. She tried to smile. Do not you think? No, dear, it will not work. You know, Leslie, over the past few weeks, I have started to like you, but in a different way. You are still a good person. You and I have 2 beautiful children. We both know that Richard will now go on active duty so that Victoria will have enough money to attend Auburn. You and I, we did a good job. But what about us as a couple? I think we will become good friends. But as soon as everything is settled, I will file for divorce. Sorry, Leslie. Leslie stood up and sat next to me on the sofa. She took my hands. Will you hate me if I keep trying? I ran my fingers through her hair. No, I will not hate you. I never will. I really thought so, she said. She got up and headed to her bedroom, but turned around. In a few days, I will leave the house, Francis. Yes, Leslie. Richard, what? He was not. That is you, I said. It is okay, Leslie. I know. She reached the bedroom door, opened it, walked in, and then turned around again. Francis. Yes, Leslie. What you and I had. It was never about the night. No, never, Francis. Do you think maybe? I smiled. Yes, it is possible. Just not right now. After the divorce, maybe. Then we will turn everything upside down, will we not? Absolutely, Leslie. She entered the bedroom and closed the door. I heard her crying. I think she cried all night. It was sad. Our life together was over. We had wonderful years together. I knew I would miss her. I doubted I would ever find anyone else. I did not even look. But fate intervened again. My new boss, Thurman Freeman, was not just difficult, he was huge. And I had proof. It was mid-April. Leslie had been away from home for less than a week when Thurman decided we needed to take a look around. A walk up and down the old C&O Canal. Inspection. Damn inspection. What he really wanted was more poison ivy. He had other plans. He invited several politicians and a couple of forestry officials on a tour. Thurman wanted to show off by leading them down the canal. I had no. There was no problem with this until Thurman insisted that I go with them. Everything quickly became clear to me. All the politicians, except one, were black, and all the foresters, except one, were black as well. As we walked, the genius Thurman began to list types of flora and characteristics of animals. Big deal. Maybe if I had not walked that path with him earlier, pointing out exactly what he needed to know. This guy could quote pages and paragraphs about global warming, but he had no idea what was actually happening in the forest he was supposed to manage. Each forest area, no matter where it is located, develops its own unique environment, its own ecosystem. Ours had existed for quite a long time and was very distinctive, but he did not understand anything about it. Even worse, he decided to use me as a kind of go-between. He played the role of the expert, and I had to be his assistant, like Rochester from the old Jack Benny movies. Leslie would have been proud of me. She loved those old comedies. We left the path and approached the river. As I said, it was April, and there was almost no greenery. The Potomac was clearly visible. We were walking along the shore, and Thurman was still explaining something when I noticed a tragedy in progress. Luckily, we were nearby. A couple in a canoe decided to go through the dam, but they capsized. Thurman had just begun to give me another task, but I was no longer listening. Luckily, I had good boots. I saw the canoe overturn and hurried into the icy water, half waddling, half swimming toward them. The girl managed to get out, but I noticed her companion only at the last moment. His arms and shoulders flashed above the water and disappeared again. He was stuck in a whirlpool. I moved as quickly as I could. I think I reached him on the 3rd attempt. At least he was wearing a life jacket. I reached out, grabbed his vest, and pulled with all my might. Thank God he surfaced. It was not easy to get him out. He was almost unconscious. I grabbed him by the shoulders and the head, and, again, half swimming, half wading, I climbed ashore. I laid him on the ground and began performing artificial respiration. After several attempts, he began to cough and choke. At that moment, his girlfriend ran up to us. This man turned out to be not the most pleasant person. He was out of breath and, at the same time, swearing at me. His girlfriend quickly put him in his place, telling him that I literally saved his ungrateful life. By this time, Thurman and his entourage arrived. Thurman looked at the others and said something like, "That is what we are doing here. and then turned to me and said, "Why do not you go change your clothes? We will meet later in my office." He was right about one thing. Saving people was something we did sometimes. But I definitely did not see him in the water, and certainly no one said "good job" to me or even "hey, screw you." He did not understand it. I was not a boy. I was over 40. I was exhausted. It was April. I was not going to any office. I was going home and then maybe to the doctor. Smart people do not play in icy water if they want to live a long life. A couple of days later, I received a copy of his report on the inspection and the incident at the river. It described what happened, but I swear it made it sound like he was the one who saved the man. This was the last straw for me. I knew that no matter what, I would leave. Leslie moved in with my parents. She found a better job. She got a position at Walmart. At least there, she had more hours, a better salary, and possibly health insurance. I went back to my job and tried just to get through each day in the park. I also started looking for something new. Two events happened, one amazing, the other tragic. At first, the amazing one. I found a great job. The National Park Service liked my resume. Moreover, they had a vacancy in Shenandoah Valley. It was not just work. I got the chance to work on the famous Skyline Drive. Yellowstone or Glacier National Park might be considered the top parks. But for our region, this opportunity was top-notch. I submitted my resignation. Thurman was sad. Well, yes, of course, I had to sort out the formalities of moving from the state to the federal system, but it was easy. This was my chance. Then, tragedy happened. Leslie left, disappeared from my life. She lived with other people, my parents, and got a new job. We rarely saw each other, and when we did, it was limited to a simple hello. Then my mother called me. It was about Leslie, of course. It was too good to be true. Surely Leslie had come up with another trick. I waited a week and received several more calls from my mother before I went to see them. When I arrived at my parents' house, they were already waiting for me in the kitchen. I asked, "Well, what now?" Mom was sitting at the table. Dad stood behind her. He said, "She is not there." I realized we were talking about Leslie, but I still asked, "She is not there? Where is she?" Mom took the floor, and I realized the matter was serious. She began. Leslie received a certified letter from some lawyer in Philadelphia. Francis. She literally fainted. Her father died, some kind of cancer. We think he died a long time ago. Oh, I said. Did she go to Baltimore for the funeral? No funeral, my mother said. Nothing. He died, and that is it. Leslie received a letter and a cashier's check. She showed it to us. Nothing more. No explanation. I asked, "Well, where will they bury him?" Dad replied, "You did not understand your mother. Nobody knows anything, like your mom said. We think he died a long time ago." So Leslie went to Baltimore. She called her mother, but some secretary answered. Her mother also disappeared. I just stood there, not knowing what to do. Dad quickly put everything in its place. "You should go to Baltimore. You have to figure out what is going on." "Damn, son, nothing bad happened. The old man died. Leslie probably received a check, perhaps from some old trust fund. Who knows? And who even cares about this? Let us wait a couple of days. She will call or say something when she is ready. I will go home. Call me when she gets in touch or returns." But she did not call and did not come back. My children started putting pressure on me. 2 weeks later, I found myself back at my parents' house. Mom immediately took care of me. "Son, we did not tell you everything last time. Your father wrote something down. This lawyer is from Philadelphia. Your father managed to write down his name and check. He saw him only once. $210,000. So what? I asked. Dad replied, $210,000 trust fund. It does not look like it. No funeral services, nothing. Something is not clean here. Now 2 weeks had passed. We called Leslie's number, to no avail. Son, you have to do something, they said. I looked first at my father, then at my mother. My guess was that Leslie had gone somewhere with her mother. Her father was probably buried somewhere secluded, perhaps even in St. Helena. What do I know? She probably just turned off the phone, gave up on all fronts. On me, on our relationship, on Oakland. Most likely she lived with millions somewhere. I thought so, but then I realized it was nonsense. The parents were right. Something had to be done. Okay, Mom, Dad, I will go to Baltimore. They both breathed a sigh of relief. I did not realize how excited they were, although that is not true. I knew they were worried. They were panicking. I was just being stubborn. I did not have much time, about 10 weeks. I was no longer part of the government system and was not scheduled to appear in Virginia until the end of the summer. They waited for some other older person to retire before they hired me. I packed my overnight bag and headed to Baltimore. When I arrived, I made several disturbing discoveries. The Wells family's old Roland Park home had been sold. Mother and daughter had disappeared. I went to the church Mrs. Wells attended. I knew she had been a regular member for several years. They must have known something there. When Mrs. Wells learned of her husband's death, she sold all her property, donated it to the church, and settled in a sectarian nursing home for nuns. This house was located near the city, so it was easy to find. I got there, and they reluctantly agreed to let me. I went to talk to Mrs. Wells. Mrs. Wells had changed her name and adopted the name of a long-deceased sister she had known as a child. She agreed to meet with me, but only for a short time. Our conversation was of little use. Her new name was Sister Felicita, and she did not respond to anything else. I asked, "Sister Felicita, do you know where I can find my wife?" At that time, I was already officially divorced, but I did not know it yet. Mrs. Wells sat quietly with her hands folded in her lap. I thought to myself, finally, she has found her place in the universe. She replied, "My daughter went to where she always said she loved most." "That is good," I said. "Yes, where is it?" I asked. She smiled one of those smug, pious smiles and replied, "It does not matter because I know she is happy now." This got to me. It sounded like she thought Leslie was dead. I always suspected this woman, but now I was sure. "Of course," I said. "Great. Where is it?" Her answer was alarming. Very alarming. Next to God. I started to get impatient. "Listen, Mrs. Wells, or Sister Felicita, or whatever your name is now. I need to find Leslie. Everyone at home is worried about her. What about her father? What happened to him? I heard he died. Where is he buried?" She looked at me and said, "Everything is in the hands of God. It is better for you not to know." She started to get up. I was completely perplexed. I stood up and grabbed her hand. "Wait, where's my wife? Where's my wife?" Two young men, probably doctors, interns, or something similar, appeared out of nowhere. One of them looked at me and said, "Sorry, sir. It seems Sister Felicita wants to leave." I tried to stop them from taking Mrs. Wells away, but they were stronger, younger, and clearly knew how to handle someone like me. Very quickly and decisively, they took her out of the room and escorted me to my Jeep. One of them said very politely, "Please stay away." Then both disappeared inside the building. So I remained outside this sanatorium, or whatever it was, knowing even less than when I had started. One thing I knew for sure was that I needed to find Leslie, and I needed to find out what was really going on. It was also clear to me that I needed help. I opened my phone and called Victoria. Victoria must have been expecting something because she answered immediately. "Dad." "Victoria, honey, I am very worried," I said. "I am scared, but I do not want to scare you. I do not know where your mother is. Perhaps something happened to her. I need help. Where can we meet?" "Call Richard," she responded, as if I was acting strangely. Maybe I was, but this should not have happened. I could have sworn that Leslie was somewhere relaxing, drinking mint juleps, and attracting the attention of guys. Who was I kidding? I knew my Leslie. She was not the type to drink mint juleps. Victoria told me, "Do not worry. Where are you in Baltimore? Near some sanatorium or insane asylum? What is the name of this place?" Clara or something like that. "It is not far from Baltimore. It is a nursing home, mainly for nuns and elderly women who were major benefactors." "Yes, this is the same place," I said. "Okay," she said. "I will call Richard. Let us meet at Red Lobster in Frederick tonight. Say at 8 o'clock. How does that sound?" "Okay," I replied. "I will be there." We hung up. At the same time, I was scared. I did not know where Leslie was. She was prone to depression. Had she done something foolish? God, I hoped the kids could help. I was standing outside Red Lobster when Richard and Victoria pulled up. We went inside and ordered. I felt like I was not hungry, but I still managed to eat some baked salmon. It seemed a bit dry to me. It was missing some hollandaise sauce or something similar. Richard and Victoria ordered crab legs. They did not look as worried as I did. When we finished eating, I told them everything I knew. Then Victoria reminded me that there was some Aunt Annie who seemed to live in Seattle. I looked at my children. "I am worried. Can I rely on you?" Victoria took my hand. "We will do this together." "Yes," Richard laughed. "I think we are all going to Seattle." I thought, okay, this makes sense. What a relief. I did not want to do this alone. Then I asked, "What about that lawyer in Philadelphia?" Richard replied, "We have already checked it. The money your mother received was deposited into the account just a few months ago. They were told that they would receive a death notice and then would have to transfer money to their mother. That is all they knew." It all seemed very confusing and unusual to me. We returned to Oakland and turned Leslie's room upside down. Victoria found Aunt Annie's name and address. It was not much, just an old letter from when Leslie visited her many years ago. We found a phone number and called it. Aunt Annie was glad to hear from us. We bought tickets and flew there. When we arrived, she said many things I had never known before and which were very disturbing. God, I thought my life was back to normal. Leslie and I were divorced, but we were starting to become friends. I had a new job, a new career. The children were moving forward. And then, bam, we found ourselves in a house in Seattle. I ate Tums like they were candy. I had not slept for several days. My head was pounding. This elderly woman was destroying everything and everyone. Something I did not know was Aunt Annie's married name, Denise McCorley. She opened my eyes. At first, she made it clear that no one in her family had any connection with the old families of Maryland. They were descendants of Irish refugees, vagrants who fled Ireland in the 1830s. This whole story about the big family inheritance was a lie that her parents and grandparents had made up. I thought, so much for the tight control of family background. She explained that their money was mostly acquired during the Civil War. They secretly purchased arms and ammunition and transported them to Virginia to sell at inflated Confederate prices. Later, she said, they turned to bootlegging and other shady activities until they accumulated enough capital to move on to more legitimate ventures. In short, I was finally convinced of my belief. My wife's family consisted of a group of false snobs. However, all this did not help explain the situation with Leslie. But Aunt Annie was determined. She began to reveal details. "I remember, Aunt Annie," I said. "You mentioned, you see, Francis, by the time you showed up, our family was already deep into this social game. It was all so blatantly false." "Oh yes," she replied. "When I met my man, Reuben Fitzgerald, a simple auto mechanic, they were horrified. I was forbidden to communicate with him. You saw for yourself how it worked," she said, pointing to the fireplace littered with family photographs. I asked, "What about Leslie and her parents?" She frowned. "It was a completely different story. You see, Leslie's mother had other ambitions. She wanted to devote herself to God." I said, "But..." And Annie put her hand on my knee. She smiled at my children. Leslie's mother was very naive. She met the man who became her husband at some social event. He was a nobody, no money, no connections, nothing to sell. He seduced her. She got pregnant. Of course, as a good Catholic, she could not get rid of the pregnancy. Our parents were furious. They found this man, Leslie's father, and they worked something out. I never knew what it was until a few months ago. I was stunned and intrigued. "And what was that?" I asked. She continued, "You see, about a year ago, Leslie's father found out that he had stomach cancer. His time was coming to an end. I think he turned to faith. He came to me. 'Why do you?' I asked. 'I do not know. Anyway, here is what he told me.' I leaned back in my chair. It was leading somewhere. She noticed my interest and continued. 'Our parents proposed to him. You see, when he came to me, he said that he already had a family, a wife and another daughter in Omaha, Nebraska. But there was a problem. His other eldest daughter suffered from osteogenesis imperfecta. Osteogenesis imperfecta? Brittle bone disease. I asked. She was older than Leslie and had only recently been diagnosed. But he explained that it was a complex disease. There are different categories. Some are not so serious. Others are terrible. One of the features of the disease was that treatment cost a lot of money. He decided to marry Leslie's mother, get a job in our family, and secretly save money for the treatment of his other daughter. And he did this for over 40 years. Nobody knew anything. I could not believe it. And that other daughter, is she dead? Aunt Annie shook her head. No, she is still alive. She is married. She has children, even grandchildren. They all live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He told me all this because he knew he was dying. I think he needed to confess to someone. Did Leslie find out about this? I asked. She replied, that is the rub. I knew, but no one else. And then when her father died, and all she got was a check, she started investigating. I called that lawyer in Philadelphia. She called me back, and then, like you, I came here. She said her mother did not tell her anything. I told her everything I knew. I am sorry, Francis. I had to, she said. And what happened then? I asked. We went to New Mexico. We came up with some excuse about researching her case. We did not know, but her case was well documented. If anyone had even the slightest suspicion, everything could have been revealed. But no one ever suspected anything. And you went to New Mexico? I asked. Yes, and it was devastating, she replied. This woman was several years older than Leslie. She had pictures of her father, photographs of Leslie's father with his other daughter, Frances. It was terrible. I do not know how Leslie stood it, but she did. This other woman, her half-sister, and all these photographs. There were pictures of her on a pony with Leslie's father standing proudly nearby. Photos at Disney World, Dollywood, Gatlinburg, on the beach, near the theater, her in her scout uniform, childhood birthday parties. Everything Leslie dreamed of but never got. Not with her father, anyway. Frances, it destroyed her. It just destroyed her. I looked at my children, then back at Aunt Annie. My children were crying. I wanted to cry too. What did Leslie say? It is funny, Annie said, but she acted strangely. She did not ruin this other woman's life. She hid everything. She pretended to be who we said she was. When we left, the other sister never knew that Leslie was her sister. Moreover, Leslie stepped aside and then returned with a check for $200,000. She handed it to her, saying that it was part of the agreement her father had reached. I do not know where Leslie got that kind of money. You know, I knew where the $200,000 came from, but I did not tell Aunt Annie. Well, why not? I just shook my head. Annie looked at me. I think she guessed it. And what happened after that? What did she say? Aunt Annie took my hands. She told me about you too. She did not think she would ever see you again. She thought she ruined everything for you. I am surprised you are here. I think it is because of them. She nodded towards my children. Yes, mainly because of them, I answered. But tell me, what else did she say? She became strange. Strange in a frightening way. She said something about Hawthorne, about some character named Beatrice, something about poison. I did not know who or what it was about. I even went to the library and borrowed a book, but I still did not understand. It scared me. Did she say anything else? Did she say where she was going? Annie shook her head. Francis, I think she is dead. I think when she left, she was already in a state of death. It was as if she was already dead. She said something about finding the one place where she felt truly comfortable, able, happy, and safe, but she never said where it was. I thanked her and told her that we would do everything possible to find her niece, but I was no longer sure that it was possible. Victoria, Richard, and I returned to Auckland. I needed to pack my things. Richard was going into the army, and Victoria wanted to prepare for admission to Auburn. We talked about my ex-wife, their mother. They did not have any idea where she might be, but I had a guess. When the children were little, we traveled a lot. I was a forester, and this set the tone for our trips. We never visited large cities or noisy attractions. We went to Niagara Falls, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Glacier National Park, the Grand Canyon, Purgatory, and Acadia. It was in Acadia that we spent the most time. One of my friends had relatives in a small town south of Acadia who owned a house. It was a quiet place, somewhat similar to Auckland, but even more secluded. It was close to Acadia, Bar Harbor, and a modest beach the locals called Sandy Beach. The water there was always icy, like our spring rivers. Leslie just fell in love with this place and that tiny piece of sand. Much of her love for Acadia stems from Hawthorne. Leslie and I were watching an old movie called The House of the Seven Spires. I thought it was mediocre, a story about unpleasant people, but Leslie liked it. Although she hated Vincent Price, she became fascinated by Hawthorne's work. She read almost everything he wrote. I told her that she should read Mark Twain instead. He is the real master. I remember one time Twain addressed politicians and said, "Truth is a precious thing. It is a good thing you use it so rarely." Leslie loved Sandy Beach. She enjoyed walking and whale watching there. The water was icy cold. I imagined her slowly walking towards the sea, going deeper and deeper, and then diving in. She would disappear. It would be her style. I had to do it. I needed to get back to Bar Harbor. I needed to go to the places where she could have spent her last moments, stand on the same stones, feel the same wind. I was filled with regret. I would give anything to have her back. I went to Sandy Beach. It was already autumn, September. The weather remained pleasant during the day, but the nights had become cold. I walked down the steps leading to the beach. At the far end of the sandy strip, right next to the water, there was a chair. A woman was sitting in it. I knew it was her. There were two elderly men nearby. Nothing unusual. I had seen this before. I walked along the entire beach and approached her from behind. In her hands was a book, The Scarlet Letter. But how could it be otherwise? I gently placed my hands on her shoulders. She turned and said, "I thought." I said nothing. She saw that it was me. She just sat and looked at me. I took the book from her hands and threw it across the beach. Then I helped her up. I folded the chair and threw it aside. Then I said, "Come on, you will love it in Virginia." I put my arm around her shoulders and led her back across the beach. Subscribe to our channel so your love does not slip away, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you are under 18, please do not watch the next story. Click to the next one.